And someone else, Rich, if you can turn your camera off, Bernie, if you can turn your camera off, even though we're not even seeing you, if we could turn your camera off. Okay. And just so that you know, we're also simulcasting in Facebook and on YouTube and in Canada. So we've got you all over the place. And hopefully, Bernie, you will turn your camera off soon. If not, I might have to do it for you. But we are not quite there. Not quite there yet. Not quite there yet. The other gentleman you see on the screen is Andrew, who, well, he just ran away. So there you go, Andrew, who is coming to us from Sydney, Australia. Andrew is the founder of the company that distributes NiSi in the United States. We have someone from Nova Scotia. Hello, Nova Scotia. How are you, Pat? All right, we're official. So I'm going to start it again. I'm Jim Reisman. I run the NiSi filters in the United States. I'm based in Los Angeles. I am bringing a series of webinars to you about all different types of subjects that have to do with people that shoot landscape photography, both professionally and as a passion. And today we have Josh Miller, who is an author and a photographer, incredibly good photographer, as you can see back behind his head there. And you'll get a close-up of some of his images as well. Josh has been published widely. I know him from Outdoor Photographer, and I know he's been published in many, many other magazines, and his photography is excellent and widely seen. We always have a discount associated with our webinars. Today, if you use the code that is flashed in front of you now, you can take 15% off our full range of NiSi filters and camera accessories. Not our 15mm lens, unfortunately, but if you're interested in the 15mm lens, you can always DM me and I'll let you know what we might be able to do on that. We also have our brand new Explorer line of camera accessories, compact tripods, ball heads, camera accessories such as L brackets and different articulated fittings, and a pair of excellent lights. So that's it. That's the commercial. You've paid your dues for coming here. And I'm going to introduce Josh. I'm going to let you take it over. I'll be in the background. I will be watching chat for questions. And at a certain point, when Josh is ready, he'll also open the floor to questions. Laurie, if I can ask you to please turn your camera off, I would appreciate it. And enjoy the show.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming, you guys. I will pull up my screen here. Just give me a moment to share my screen. Get the slideshow thing going. So first, like Jim said, my name's Josh Miller. Let me get the thing off the screen here so I can see the full slide. All right. Yeah, I'm an outdoor photographer. We were joking before this started a little bit about some of the different types of photography we do and have done. And, I've definitely done some commercial stuff and weddings and all of that stuff, but slowly gravitated towards, more of what my passion is, which is kind of what we'll talk about. So to kind of get things going, I typically do more presentations in person. Obviously with COVID this year, I've been doing a lot more on Zoom, like the rest of us all. So normally I really enjoy like the fun of like interacting with an audience and things like that. So like Jim said, when appropriate or whatever, I'd be totally interested in people asking questions, and, I'll stick around at the end and try to, fill in anything that I can help with. That's what I'm here for. So, please do, in the chat or whatever, connect with Jim or, reach out. I'll try to, maybe even ask if anybody has any questions. I'll try to remember. So first, I just wanted to say thanks to NiSi for hosting me, for having me do this talk. I kind of ended up going down this road, and this sort of developed out of, I sent an email to, I think probably just a general email that ended up with Jim, I think is how it happened. I'm kind of asking, hey, I'm interested in trying out. I'd just gotten the new Nikon, for the Z cameras, their 14 to 24 lens. It's a 2.8. And I was trying to figure out filters, and I had been shooting the regular DSLR similar version of the lens, the older version, which had this weird bulbous front. And now that's not the case anymore. It's a flatter fronted lens. And so, we talked back and forth, and he sent me some filters to play with, and it was very interesting. You can see the photo on the right from Yosemite. For years and years, I'd pretty much given up on the square filters. And he was like, well, I'll just send you this and you give it a try. And, I had been using these like really chintzy Koken things from whatever, 20 years ago. So it was pretty cool to see, where things have come. So thanks again for hosting. And yeah, I've just last weekend carried a whole bunch of filters, and then ended up way up into the Sierras, and then ended up not actually getting very much light. Got one morning for like 2 minutes, but I've been really happy with so far my experience with them. So let's see if this thing will let me change slides. Oh, there we go. All right. So kind of the purpose of my talk, and this is obviously why you guys came, and I know there's some people I know on here, like I can see a few people's names. They've been on trips with me and things like that. But it really is to talk about combining photography and writing. And we were joking before this started about the fact we kind of feel like, I think most photographers, and I'm generalizing a bit, but most photographers have this dream of being published, and whether that's being published just, one time to justify all that money we've all spent on photo gear, or if it's a dream of like making that your full living. I think to some extent, there's always, most of us have some thought in our head of doing that. And, for me, I'm definitely, I would say, a photographer who writes as opposed to a writer who photographs. And that probably differs for different people. But in general, I really look at it as, for me, the writing was a way to help sell my photos. And, that has changed and developed to some extent over time. Let me see if I can hide this. There we go. Okay. So a little bit of my own personal story, which is, I tried to make it kind of fun and entertaining. So I grew up in Washington State. I was really into outdoor stuff as a kid. So, this bottom picture, I found this in like a photo album the other day when I was trying to put this together. So this is my grandfather and I cutting wood when I was a little kid. I was always interested in like being outside. I was in the Boy Scouts. I spent a summer in Alaska, well, several summers in Alaska, but a summer working in college, which is that photo. I can't move my mouse on here that you can see, but the photo of me with the red jacket and stuff. Summer after my freshman year of college. And then I played in the marching band, and so I was really passionate about outdoor stuff and music. And I tried to find the most embarrassing photos I could of myself. There were a couple that I thought were probably the bathtub ones and stuff like that weren't appropriate. But so I took that to college. I'd always been interested in photography. In that I remember my uncle Mark had a film camera back then, right? And I remember always being interested in taking pictures with it and kind of playing with it. But I never really was like all that serious about it. It's just like at Christmas when they'd visit or something. But in college, that summer that I spent working in Alaska, I bought a camera. For those of you guys who remember the film cameras, it was an ME Super, I believe, a Pentax. So I bought this Pentax. I went up to Alaska. I worked at Denali for the summer. And there was another photographer there, another guy I worked at a hotel. It was just any job to get to go was kind of the idea. So there was this other photographer. He kind of worked at the hotel, and he basically kind of taught me, and I was learning. And this is the days you'd like get the roll of film, you'd shoot it, you'd put it in the mail, and it would come back, later on. So when I went back to college the next year, the whole side story, I kind of tried to drop out, but couldn't find a winter job, so I went back to college, and I was washing dishes as my job, and a friend of mine worked for the college newspaper in Tacoma. I went to PLU in Tacoma, and she said, "Oh, hey, you got a camera? Could you take this film and go shoot this event?" And I thought, okay. And I went, and they paid me whatever it was. I don't remember the number. It always sticks in my head as $50, but that seems pretty high. But either way, they paid me, and I thought, man, I went for like a half an hour to this thing. It was fun. I played with my camera, and that was like 4 or 5 hours of dishwashing. So pretty quickly that turned into me shooting more and more for them and washing fewer and fewer dishes. And I really got into it pretty quick. I quickly became the photo editor of the college newspaper with a friend of mine. We were co-photo editors, and he and I have gone on to be lifelong friends. We still do, a trip a year or two. He lives in Washington. I live in California now. But so one of the big things I shot was the WTO protests in Seattle, and I won some college photographer of the year type awards and stuff for some of the stuff that I shot. But for the most part, what I discovered, I started interning at a couple of local newspapers, one in Tacoma, one in Puyallup. And my vision or my path was I was going to be a newspaper photographer. That was the path. We're talking mid 90s at this point. I graduated high school in 97. So end of the 90s, I guess. And I was totally following that path. Many other people, you'd intern at a small paper, then you get an internship or a job at a bigger paper, and you work your way up to National Geographic, right? That's what we all want. So in doing that, I realized pretty quickly, by the time I got to graduation, that I'd spent most of my time and energy photographing things that I didn't actually enjoy. Meaning, I'm not a big team sports person. You'll see I'm into outdoor activities, things like that. But I was going to football games, going to basketball games, 20 high school graduations in one spring, things like that. And while it's fun to get to sit on the sidelines at a football game, if you're not really into football, pretty quickly I got burned out. So I actually graduated from college. Oh, let's see. It's going to change. Perfect. I actually graduated from college and did what every parent of a recent college graduate dreams that they will do. And that is I moved into my minivan and basically lived in Yosemite and Joshua Tree and Lower Colorado River and Catalina Island, guiding outdoor trips and basically working as little as possible and playing as much as possible. So this is my house off and on for a couple of years. It's got storage, it's got seating, it's got everything a single, whatever, 21-year-old dude could possibly dream of. And in that time, I had my camera gear with me, but for a couple of years, I didn't really shoot anything. I went from shooting 20, 40, even 60 rolls a week for these different, newspapers to shooting nothing. And at the time I thought, oh man, I'm a failure. I've given up. I'm not, but I just couldn't figure out how to put the passion part for the outdoors together with the photography part. And I was kind of burned out thinking, I don't really want to go work for a paper and photograph, 20 high school graduations every year. So it took a few years, but eventually I kind of in a sense fell back in love with photography, but I started shooting the things that I was doing as opposed to the things that someone else was assigning me, which, from a business standpoint or from probably my parents' standpoint, probably not the best choice in that, in the beginning, if you're only shooting the things that you want to shoot, they often don't pay versus a newspaper, they're calling you like, go here and we'll give you money. So yeah, my income was pretty low for a while, but you don't need a lot when you're that age and you're living in a car. So the picture on the left, the Sierra Heritage cover, this is my very first cover that I feel like, and I have others from farther back of sports and stuff, but this is the first one that I really felt like was my thing, the thing that I was passionate about, which was, landscapes, wildlife, outdoor recreation, that sort of thing. So, it breaks kind of the conventional rules of what makes a good photo. It's not shot at sunrise. It's Manzanar in the Eastern Sierras, one of the Japanese internment camps from World War II. Handheld. It's not super sharp. It's a slide. But, I just on a whim sent it to this magazine. And they said, oh, we love it. It was the first thing they'd ever seen of mine. And we want to put it on the cover. And it was like, ooh, it was amazing. And so I went on and continued to work for them for quite a while. And this kind of fits into that story of like, how do you, the audience, and, how do any of us like break into getting published? And I would say, as I'm doing this talk, that it's very dependent on what particular thing you're interested in photographing. The same process will take place, but you will be dealing with, different editors and different things. So, so I continued on. Jen, my wife in the picture on the left, and our dog that we used to have, we moved to Nevada City, California, where she'd gone to high school and her folks lived. And I continued doing outdoor stuff. I also was doing commercial stuff, working in an outdoor school, teaching environmental education, kind of a mix of all of those things, but really trying to put my photographic energy into things that I personally enjoyed doing, as opposed to things that necessarily I thought were going to be the things that paid at least, you know, the biggest or whatever. And so it took longer. I think it's a slower path to get there, but at the same time, I think I made conscious choices, and I would advocate really that maybe everyone should do that if you don't want to get burned out. Made conscious choices along the way to choose things that, you know, were feeding my creative soul. All right. So continuing with that, you know, I got more interested in bald eagles. Some of you guys know I teach bald eagle workshops, stuff like that. And I had a mentor from the outdoor school who is a really well-known eagle photographer. And so he kind of connected me with some people in Alaska. So I started making trips to Alaska and started selling photos to National Geographic from, you know, the eagle, even before I did workshops. You know, this is, what is this? I want to say a 6 megapixel camera, maybe 10. You know, basically you almost had to manual focus. The focusing wasn't very good, you know, but you go to the right place at the right time, you get a lot of chances. So, and then I continued that and to grow. And this comes back to kind of the story of, you know, what the topic here is in terms of adding writing. What I was finding was I could sell individual images, but it's hard to get that next step. And the next step for me was I realized I'm pretty decent at talking to people. I'm pretty decent at talking about photography, pretty knowledgeable, pretty good at teaching it. And, you know, I was definitely not like a perfect English student. You know, I can write well enough. It's kind of, I always tell people when I talk to them, it's like, yeah, I was the kid that in, you know, 6th grade would take like 3 hours to write a page. You know, it was very difficult. But what I realized was when I'm talking about something in my own voice that I'm passionate about, it's a whole lot easier to write than when you're writing that essay about, you know, whatever, something that the English teacher gave you. So I started pitching stories to photo magazines. So first I started in with Shutterbug. It was a little bit harder to get into, or a little bit easier, I should say, to get into. You know, over the course of several years, I mean, I probably did 5 or 6 articles a year for him for a while. And the editor left, a new guy came. You know, really it's all about that relationship with the editor. And you'll notice with some of my photos, my personal style, like the photo on the left, I like the wider shot with the you know, smaller subject. And you'd see that if you saw my wildlife stuff. Like I have the in-your-face shots of the eagles or the whatever. But you know, to me, it's giving that subject a place to live is most interesting. So the one on the right is from the Grand Canyon. So I've done a couple of river trips down the Grand Canyon and shot for magazines and rafting companies, stuff like that. So then I kind of used that as a springboard. Eventually Shutterbug doesn't even exist as a print publication anymore. I actually emailed with the editor not that long ago, kind of like, you guys ever going to get going again? Are you going to, you know, maybe have a little bit higher rate for the web stuff, things like that? Because, you know, I think it's just, there are fewer people buying magazines. There are fewer magazines, fewer pages, fewer pictures. So that's been a challenge, which we could kind of talk about, is as the market has changed, you know, how many magazines did you all get 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you know, versus today? You know, there's just, the magazine racks are smaller, that, you know, and that was, you know, going into it, kind of the vision, you know, for the future was, you get an agency, you get signed with the stock agency selling your work, you do magazine work. And then that's like, you know, that's the vision I had. So, so I used that Shutterbug to kind of help open the door to start working with Outdoor Photographer, which I still do quite a bit of work for them. I write, well, I can't tell you what I have in the queue because that wouldn't be fair to them, but I have an article last month, and I've got 3 or 4 more in the next 6 or 8 months for them. So, you know, I pretty regularly do stuff with them at this point. So, so to change that from my story so much to, you know, how does one get their work published? You know, having a sense of, you know, where I came from, which was like this passion for outdoor stuff, but yet struggling to figure out how to connect that with my photography. Really, it started to take off for me once I recognized, like, I'm going to shoot the things that I love doing, and then I'm going to find some end use for those, as opposed to I'm going to do the things that someone else tells me to do because that's easier as far as finding the work. So something to think about. So the big thing that I would recommend to start with, you know, for you all and myself and anyone else that asks the question, you know, how does one get published? Well, first it's, what are you shooting? What are you passionate about? if your work is really good because you're passionate about it, and whether or not you're getting paid or not, you're going to spend 7 hours photographing that flower in the dark room, or not a dark room, but in a studio. If that's what you're into, then that's probably what you should be getting published in, because that's the thing you're strongest with. And if you start writing about that, it's that much easier to get published, because it kind of, in a sense, the writing sells the photos. I was joking around, before we started, telling a story about, the thing you're passionate about. I don't have the picture in the slideshow. I can show it at the end or whatever, but I went a couple of weeks ago for just a couple of nights up in the Sierras, and we hiked 5,000 feet in like 8.5 miles. Like, it was a very burly hike, and spent a couple of nights up at almost 12,000 feet. And, spending all that time, I literally got 2 minutes of actual photographic light in the entire time that we were there. But at the same time, it was awesome. I sat in a tent in the cold and then the hot for hours and hours, but because I'm passionate about it, the photo, I think, really stands out and really shows. So the same thing, if you photograph flowers, you do portraits, whatever your particular interest is, I think the key is it needs to be something that you're photographing, not because you think someone wants to see it, but rather you're photographing something because you want to see it. And then you got to find an audience. That's the next step. So this is one of the early, I don't remember if this is the first article I did for Outdoor Photographer or one of the first. It was actually an article my wife and I did together. So I shot the photos, and then she wrote, they put my name on it, thanks, but mostly she wrote most of it, honestly. She wrote probably 90% of it, and I kind of and she's an English teacher, or has an English teaching credential. So, it's nice to be married to someone who can actually spell, because I can't. So, yeah, we kind of combined on that. And this was a story, and I put the whole thing in there. Obviously you can't read it, but you can see the photos. This is the Alsac River. I'll back up. This is the Alsac River. It starts in the Yukon in Haines Junction, and then flows all the way through the Yukon down into Alaska, and then to eventually ends at Glacier Bay National Park. And so we did this for the rafting company, actually hired us and Yukon Tourism to come up and to do an article and shoot the photos and so on and so forth, which is a whole nother story about trying to hustle on both sides to get someone to help, sponsor a trip to then, do the article and so on and so forth. So I'll let these sit for a second just so you can see the photos. So if you can see my face, my little zoom window is covering it in the top right corner. But if you can see it in the top right corner, the photo's they didn't run the photo from the thing, but if you look at that raft, there's this like weird contraption sticking off the back of the raft. Well, what we did, and now GoPros have kind of made this obsolete to some extent, but what we did was we strapped an oar to the side of the raft, strung it with a bunch of straps, and then I took a Pelican case, like just a camera-sized one, cut a big opening on one end, got some polycarbonate plexiglass stuff from like the local glass shop, glued it in there, and then I can mount a camera in that, and then I use a magic arm, which is this funky, weird metal contraption that Manfrotto or Bogan makes. But basically, we were able to mount that case way out there on the edge of the oar, and then had like a 20-foot like cable release button, so we could sit in the raft and fire the camera that's like out there looking over the boatman's shoulder. In general, I haven't been using that lately, just because the GoPro makes it so easy, and you can still get pretty decent quality. But back then but that's what we were doing, and that's kind of, again, the passion of like, oh, we spent like 3 hours rigging this thing to be able to get one shot, which was a good shot. I don't know why they didn't use it. So just checking my time. So the next step really is finding what are you passionate about, is finding your audience. Like, if you want to get published, well, who publishes the stuff that you like to create? If it's butterfly photos, well, why are you sending them to whatever, the mountain bike magazine or vice versa? So you got to find that thing that fits with the publisher. So it used to be, you go to like a big bookstore or someplace that had a big magazine rack, and you start looking through the magazines, and you're like, oh, I like this one. And you would write down the information. Maybe you wouldn't actually buy the magazine. You'd write down like the publisher's name, their address, so on and so forth. And then you would actually send them snail mail. You would send them a letter asking for their submission guidelines. And then if you were lucky and they took you seriously and they actually read your message, your letter, they'd send them to you. And you can't just do that to, say, a National Geographic or an outside magazine or something. For the most part, they're not going to answer you. You got to show them, like, oh, I did this stuff for, in my case, like that Sierra Heritage magazine. Here's a bunch of things I've done. I'm interested in pitching to you. And then, you get that information. That's changed to some extent now, the same kind of process, but it's no longer done via snail mail. Mostly you're like finding, on their website, they might have submission guidelines that you can look at, and then you would follow them exactly. Because, if you want them to like you, which is the whole idea, you don't want to make them annoyed. Like, why can't you read the directions? So that's probably, at least in the beginning, when you're first trying to connect into these places, is finding those submission guidelines, or even better, finding someone specifically to actually interact with. And that takes time to find. So magazine racks, now it's probably more websites. Probably that's the biggest thing. Websites, I think it's very dependent on what avenue you're going for. If you're just trying to get someone to repost your stuff on Instagram, well then, yeah, the magazine rack, the book, all the rest of that's kind of irrelevant. It's really probably, and we'll talk about this towards the end, maybe less actually about the quality of the photo and more about how many followers you have, which we'll talk about, but I struggle with. So I always like to throw in a good fun photo. So this is one of my early commercial job covers here locally. And it is indeed the trade magazine called Pumper Magazine for the septic tank pumping industry, which usually in an actual room with people usually gets a good laugh, because, when you decide to become a photographer, in my case, an outdoor photographer, did you ever think like, oh yeah, I can't wait to be photographing the poop pumper machine, right? But early on, you want to take anything you can get. Doing this job back, I don't know if it has a year on it, but back whenever I did 2011, so I might have shot it in 2010. I don't know exactly. Doing that job allowed me to help build my skills, photographic skills. It allowed me to help get better at interacting with clients. In a sense, the editor in that case, rather than a publisher, but the editor was, the person at the business who wanted the photos and then the publisher that was using them. So I got hired from Pumper Magazine, but kind of worked for this Erky thing as well, Erky Septic. But it allowed me to build a bunch of skills. It certainly, it helped pay for camera gear, which is expensive, as we all know. And it allowed me to help build my client base, build my portfolio. And yeah, if Pumper Magazine calls now, I'll probably, pass them on to someone who's maybe more up and coming than, I don't want to say I don't want to work for them anymore. And I guess maybe I would, depending on how much they wanted to pay and if it fit in my schedule. But the reality is, that's a great stepping stone for someone younger who's like, developing their business and their skills and things like that. So, but yeah, you never want to go on a photo job where you're worried about having to disinfect your camera afterwards. Just check my time. Okay, so I think one of the next steps is with getting published is finding the editor. All right, so imagine now you've found, publication, whatever, it's the, Muscle Car something of America magazine, whatever that particular thing is. It's, how do you interact with them? How do you get them to look at your stuff? That's a first thing. So it's, and obviously there's always these people that like totally buck the system. My first photo job was like a National Geographic thing or whatever. Like, yeah, but how often does that happen? The reality is you start small. You do those, in my case, the Sierra Heritage, the Pumper Magazine, those things. And then you can use that to show the next person and the next person. Each publication opens the door to the next thing. I think that's a big piece of it. And so, as best you can, I honestly think the photography part of being published, and mostly we're talking photography, but it's the same with writing. I think the actual skill of photography and the actual skill of writing is I don't know what percent. It's got to be less than 50% of getting published. Like probably the most important thing is, are you fun to work with? Like if you're a total pain, then you might get one job from them, but that's it, right? Versus if you're you're nice, you're great to work with, you're fun. Like best thing in the world is if you can ever actually meet that person face to face, because all of a sudden now they have like a relationship. So that is one of the nice things with COVID actually is, people are way more comfortable doing the Zoom thing. So I have actually interacted with people that I've written emails with for years, maybe even talked on the phone with once or twice. But now, I feel like seeing their face maybe helps. I don't know. So anything you can do in person certainly helps. So let's see, each publication helps open the next door. Finding the contact info is not an easy thing, right? Like, I mean, I won't be mean, but I will say, like, if someone were to out of the blue say, oh, can I have the contact info for the editor outdoor photographer? I'm going to say no, because, one, not because I'm worried about someone competition, but I'm like, I don't want to inundate that person with stuff that may or may not be up to their level. And as a result, then jeopardize my own good standing. But at the same time, when I have had friends who, I know are ready and qualified and things like that, or maybe, and they've done the same for me, they've made those introductions. So it's who and building relationships. And then, yes, having quality work that you're passionate about, quality writing, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, be easy to work with. Have your what together. Don't waste their time. I think that's a big thing. I'll take a sec here and just say, does anybody have questions or anything before we move on to the next slide while I drink?
Hello, everyone. It's Jim. I just want to let you know that this is an opportunity if you want to unmute your mic and ask a question. This is the first time we'll be doing a webinar like this, so feel free to unmute, turn your camera on, ask a question. If I don't see someone in a couple of minutes,
Yeah, we can just take
couple of seconds, we'll move on.
Or you can raise your hand too. I would assume Jim can see that little hand raised.
Yes, I do have. What do you think about writing on Medium? I don't know what that.
Writing on media in what way?
Medium. Can Patrick, can you explain that question a little bit? And feel free to come on if you want to, Patrick.
If you can hear me?
Yes, yeah. We can.
Perfect. Medium is a web platform where writers can submit stories that can be published digitally.
Okay.
So if you do a search on your web for Medium, you should find the website.
Okay. I don't know it personally. Are you writing and then like hoping someone will pick it up?
It's part of it, yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if people are really looking there for stories and you have good material, I mean, theoretically, it would be a good way to open those doors. The trick, and I think we all have to do this in the beginning. I mean, I certainly did, is like, and I have a slide here in a minute where we kind of mention that, but is writing on spec, or, basically you're producing the stuff without 100% guarantee of a sale, which, in the beginning, I think everybody probably does that. I would think. I mean, I don't know that for certain, but because you don't yet have the relationship built with the editor, with the publication, things like that. But at the same time, if you're putting out good material, theoretically, whether that's on, photos on Instagram or Facebook, you always hear these stories of people, being discovered and so on and so forth. So, while not knowing that particular, site, I would think it's a viable option. The question is, are you one voice in, a million other voices that, it's hard to get noticed, which I kind of feel like sometimes with Instagram, personally. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, does that sort of answer your question?
Kind of, yes. And just to be more precise, Medium platform is you create a story and you could put pictures in there, and you submit your story to the platform. And if Medium pushes your story with a publisher, for example,
Mhm.
everybody that reads that article, you will get a commission on it. At the beginning, it's very, very, very tiny. We're talking about pennies and dollars, but over
Mhm.
time,
It can really help.
it goes up. Yeah, it's similar like a commission that you would have on a YouTube channel. So
Okay.
basically.
That's
That's
kind of a cool idea that I did not know existed in terms of, another avenue for writing.
Patrick, that's bonus information. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but
We'll have Patrick do a webinar in
yeah, exactly.
about 2 months. Patrick, thank you so much.
Any other?
Josh, it's Andrew here. I just wanted to ask, when you're pitching an article, do you have images that you've taken over time and have those and pitch an idea for an article, or do you, I guess, get an idea for an article and then go out and create the images to work with that topic? I'm just trying to get an idea on how you kind of put it all together and the process in that regard.
It's a really good question. And I would say the best scenario is, you pitch the idea. I'll go back a couple slides here like this. The best scenario is pitching the idea and knowing you have a buyer ahead of time, like before you go on the trip. Obviously that raises the stakes. Like if you don't come home with the goods, then, that's not good for your reputation, let alone, a contract you might have signed or something like that. In general, for what I have been doing, we're outdoor photographer more recently, most of the time I have the shots in the can before I pitch the story. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna, I'm talking with the editor about, we're talking about an article because I have their editorial count, and this is actually a good pro tip here. A lot of the publishers will have a year out editorial calendar. Like, I could tell you in, whatever, December of next year, what that particular publisher, what their main topics, what the theme of the issue will be. So I kind of go through that and I go, okay, they're going to do a night photography article. I'll pitch something for that. And so in my case, I'm trying to gather as much material all the time, images as I can, and then having those in the bank. So then when it comes time to do an article on, fall photography, I've got a bunch of material that I can pull different things that fit that story as the story develops. So I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit in the slideshow, but as that story develops first in my pitch, then, once I start writing it, it may, that bigger group of images, I'm thinking fall because I was working on the fall thing, it started out with like 60 images. And by the time I actually show it to them, it's down to maybe 10. So in answer to your question, I'll kind of go back to where we were. In answer to your question, most of the time in my case, because it's less assignment style work, I feel like those still exist, but not nearly to the extent that assignments used to exist, at least in the types of photography that I do. It tends to be, me producing it after the fact. I still do some assignment things, but the reality of it is, and this is hurt, I think, for all of us photographers, is that with stock agencies, and I had stuff in a stock agency, I had with this agency called Aurora, which was the kind of the outdoor adventure agency, international, and they sold through Getty and all the rest of it. We've all watched the income from that. I mean, I looked the other day, they since sold to another agency. They sold one of my photos for literally 1 cent, this new agency. So it's like, there's so much good imagery out there that I think publishers are less interested in hiring someone to do an assignment, because they're like, unless it's something very unique, they're able to just go out and find whatever they need on the web, for, on a stock agency or whatever, for relatively inexpensive prices. So as a result, they don't want to have to pay the cost of putting someone on a plane, hotels, logistics, all the rest of it, unless it's something like that Alsac River where there's not a lot of material from that, or, some other kind of story that, it just hasn't been photographed as much. So does that kind of answer? long-windedly.
It does. Thank you, Josh. It does. And one other quick question. Say you're just starting off and you're starting to pitch ideas to editors. Someone without a history and without much experience of being published, say you do get someone to say, yes, they like the idea. How much are you expecting to get paid for something like that as a beginner?
I'm trying to think of the best way to answer that. I think in the beginning, probably it almost doesn't matter. Like anything is great,
yeah.
And they probably will. I mean, you know, I've had incidences. I won't name names of publishers, but I've had incidences of very big name places wanting to use photos for free, and you're in this place where you're like, well, I've never been published by such and such a publisher, but I don't want to say no, and you're in this tough situation. And I was at the place where I could say, I know how much you guys pay, and I'm not going to give it away. But when you're starting, yeah, if that publisher's like, we'll give you a box of chocolates or something, in the beginning, you're really like, the value is less the financial, the payment, and way more what we would call a tear sheet, right? That you can use to open that next door. And it does bring up the question of, because we're all forever getting these emails or whatever, like, oh, we don't have a budget, but we'd love to use your work and you'll get exposure. And at what point does that exposure really, help? And at what point is it not really helping you, but helping them? That's, in terms of they're getting the image, but you're really not benefiting from it. So you always have to weigh that. If you're just starting and you haven't been published, it's probably worth it to do some of those things, maybe even for free, just to be able to say, oh yeah, my work has been used by X publisher or X client, or things like that. So yeah, I mean, actual physical dollar amounts, it probably really depends on what types of photography worlds you're in and who the publisher is, and and I think it's a lot less than you would think these days, for most places. So
thanks, Josh.
Yeah, we can keep cruising here. We're at 5:40, so
yeah, let's carry on.
So yeah, finding the editor is a big thing, and once you've found that editor, or you've made that relationship, you've got something started with a publisher, whether that's the very beginning local small town thing or the national publication, either way, you want to be the easiest person they've ever worked with. I hear all these stories from publishers and from photographers as well, and writers, and I keep kind of talking more about photography than writing in this, but the same thing applies to both of them. And like I said, I'm really looking at this as using writing to help sell one's photos, but conversely, the same principle would apply. They have like a line of people knocking at the door wanting to do work with them, especially once you get to those upper echelon publishers. So you want to be the easiest person possible. You want to get things in before they're due. You want to respond instantly to emails. You want to do it right the first time. You want to be that person that they think, oh man, this guy's so easy to deal with. As soon as I agree to it, like, it's taken care of. And I've even told publishers, editors at different places, like, that's my goal. Like, my goal is to make it so all you have to do is say yes, and then that it'll be in and it'll be done and it'll be good, and you won't have to send it back to me for a rewrite. Or in terms of the photos will, there won't be any technical issues with the photos. You won't forget to clean out the dust spots in the sky, which may or may not have happened before, probably to every one of us. And when you got a lot going on, you just don't notice it sometimes, that tiny little dust spot. But the reality is, whether it's, and the same thing from that question about that website, you want to write something that's good the first time, and you want to make it easy for them to promote you, because that's going to, again, continue that career, or that path, I guess. So in terms of creating the pitch, we kind of talked about, the olden days when we used to send like paper letters, where I wasn't typing it on a typewriter. I'm not that old, but I was like trying to make like letterhead and, like then I was putting CDs, like trying to make the CDs look professional as opposed to me like hand scrawling photos for blah, blah, blah. It's all done via Dropbox or similar things now. But in the beginning, to me, I think from the photography perspective, and it would be conversely from the writing perspective, but as a photographer, the writing, I'm writing something that creates a need for the photo. So being that I'm doing a lot of stuff, at least in terms of this talk, a lot of stuff based on, photography magazines, photography publications, I'm really working towards creating a need for my photo, not someone else's photo, not any other photo than the one I show. So I will really tailor that writing specific to that photo, and conversely use a photo that, illustrates the topic. Because, I've never had a problem with a editor, taking my writing but we're going to use this other guy's photo in it. But, I know it happens. So I try to, if I'm giving them the whole package, I want to give them the package that can't be taken apart. That's kind of my goal, to try to make it, one, easy for them, that, when I send, say, outdoor photographer, when I deal with them and we agree on an article and, the length and, when it's going to be due and all of that, I pull a batch of images, which I've already kind of pulled to some extent before even pitching it. So I know I've got the stuff. Then as I write, I look at those images and kind of shuffle them around. And then I may send the editor at whatever publication 10, 15 low res images with the finished text. They'll pick, when they read it, they'll pick the whatever number that they want in high res, and I'll Dropbox those to them and write the captions. And, that's kind of the process of it. So, if you were to look through what's on my computer, because I kind of came from that publishing side, the newspapers and things, I quickly learned, okay, here's the scene. And this is good advice for all of us photographers. Here's the scene. It's a horizontal, right? But I'm going to shoot it vertical. I'm going to shoot it with lots of room on the sky, lots of room on the foreground. I'm going to shoot it wider. I'm going to shoot it tighter. So that one scene, if you know Yosemite, say tunnel view, very well known. You got El Capitan on the left, Half Dome in the middle, Bridal Veil Falls on the right. You think about that scene, it's a fairly straightforward composition, but I'm going to come up with all the different options because I want that editor, let's say, hey, we really want to use that on the cover, but do you have a vertical instead of the horizontal? Well, yes, I do, because I shot it. So you want to think about that, to have those others. So if you saw what's on my computer, there's a lot of stuff like, it's clearly a better vertical shot, but I shot it horizontally. I shot it tighter, wider. I'm shooting a lot of different versions of the same shot to have those options, to create the need with the writing to then fill it with the photography. So we kind of already talked about creating an entire package that's easier to say yes to. We kind of already talked about, at first you may have to write and shoot without knowing that someone's going to buy it. I think probably some of those first things I did, I may have even written out the entire article and tried to share that with them. Sometimes they don't want, they're busy. People don't want to sit down and read it unless they think that it could actually be worth reading. So it's a lot easier for me now to potentially do that when I can show, all these tear sheets, these samples of things I've done. But that comes, as you start locally building, on your way. So yeah, as you build credibility, at first you may have to write the entire thing and they'll say, well, send it to us and we'll look. And as you get to know the editor, it may become, write me a quick paragraph summarizing what it would be. And then, show me 5 photos or something like that. So continuing with writing the pitch. So as you build that relationship, my favorite relationships are the ones that become way more of a conversation. And some editors are formal and they don't really want to do that. My favorite ones have always been the ones like, hey, could you call me next week and, tell me what you're up to and let's come up with some stuff. Because it's just fun and it's not stressful and things like that. So I would throw this out there for all of us, whether we're interested in the writing side or the photography or both, is that at some point, I think that the two things do diverge in that it is to some extent 2 different jobs. And to be, it's one thing when I'm writing an article for Outdoor Photographer that's a few pages long, but once you start working for, writing some kind of in-depth, several thousand word, 10 page, 20 page, 50 page, a book, whatever, I think it gets to the point that doing both at a top level really is maybe even not possible. I remember, I want to say it was either, I think it was Outside Magazine basically told me at one point, like, we don't work with photographer writers. Like, you're either a photographer or a writer. Which are you? And I was like, I guess I'm a photographer then. But, if it gets to that point, like, well, I think that's success, to some extent. So, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And then I would say, rejections happen. Don't take it too seriously. Someone's gonna say no to you a whole lot of times before someone says yes. So don't get, hung up on that. You got to have maybe a thick skin would be a way to think of it, or just the confidence that, no, I can totally do this. I don't care what they say. I know I can do this. When it comes to the actual writing, I think this is funny that I'm giving advice on this as someone who, like, I'm not making this up when I say my 6-year-old is correcting my spelling. And he's kind of a little reading genius this year. Like, he's been in kindergarten and mostly at home reading all year. But, me giving advice on writing is kind of funny. I'm sure my parents and my former English teachers would laugh about that. But the big thing is, for me, I look at it as outlining, kind of like, okay, so this is going to be an article about how to photograph bald eagles. What are like the main points? And I'll jot those down. I don't do some kind of Venn diagram fancy. I just jot those down, and then I like throw down ideas that fit about being ready, camera settings, increasing your odds, things like that. And then those slowly grow as I'm doing it. But I kind of do that real light ballparky thing, and then I walk away from it for a few days. I personally like to have a lot of time to write. That way I can come back to it and like, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. That was also good. And then slowly I'm able to, develop my voice and put it together, in a way that, actually makes sense. And ideally, even writing, let's say, like a 4 or 5 page article for whatever, a photo magazine, like, ideally I want like a month to do that. So I can work on it for 2 hours and then come back to it a few days later for another hour, and then another few hours. And then I might not look at it for a week, and then just so it can really kind of germinate and grow. I think at least for me, my writing gets better that way. So I don't have too many more slides. Once that thing is published, how do you pitch that next story? I've always looked at it as each project builds to the next one. So, I've kind of had, I feel like that I've had this like long vision of like where I wanted to get to. And there was a bit of a bump in that because I had this vision. It was going to be just doing magazine work and, selling my photos through a stock agency. And that would allow me to travel the world and do, well, the world has changed. Stock agencies, there's no money in stock photos anymore, really. And publishing of photos in magazines is really diminished as well. So, I've had to kind of readjust that course a bit, but I'm always thinking of like, well, if I do this story for these guys and then that thing for these guys, what door will that open for the next thing? So really taking the long view. No one asked this, but someone probably is thinking it, what's the timing on stuff? Well, the reality is, I have a fall article that will be an Outdoor Photographer, and I'm trying to think, I probably gave it to him finished in March, maybe April. And which means that we were probably talking about it in like December, so in terms of, things that are seasonally based, at least, whatever your particular area of being interested in getting published, you're 6 months, a year out. Like I said, I have the editorial calendar and I've got ideas for, the whole year is kind of what I'm doing. So when you do get published, make sure you say thank you. Make sure, maybe even mail an actual paper card. I know a guy who lives in Alaska who mails smoked salmon to editors. I've never quite gone that far. Either they're going to love you or the whole office is going to hate you, one of the two. Once somebody opens smoked salmon in the office. Ask for tear sheets. This is a key. It used to be like you'd get a copy of the magazine and you'd razor blade out the article and you'd photocopy it. I probably still have some in my files. I'd pay all this money for like nice color photocopies, and then I would put that in when I submitted to a new place. Well, now I just have a PDF and I can attach whichever PDFs make the most sense, for the particular thing I'm going after. And then when you do say thank you, that's a great time to pitch your next idea. So already be thinking of those new ideas. It takes me I have to dig through photos and figure out what possible stories would fit at the time, and it takes me a while to do the pitches, and I might pitch, to outdoor photographer, I might pitch 6 or 8 articles for the next year. And then, they might pick up 4 of them or 5 of them or something like that. And so I have to know that I have the goods, the photos, the whatever to put that together. But, I don't want to waste their time. I don't want to email them all the time, but I do want to keep them up to date with what I'm doing. So every time they publish something, I'm always like, hey, thanks. Oh, by the way, hey, I was just doing this thing the other day. Here's a photo from it. And I got something coming out next month, and that's exactly how, it's just a single photo and a quick little write-up, but that's exactly how it happened. Because I just, was writing back to him about something else and was like, oh, hey, by the way, I just did this cool thing. Here's this photo. So it's building that relationship, and then using those tear sheets to open the next door. So the elephant in the room, social media. There's a lot of debate on this, as far as there's a huge potential audience with social media, and there's no gatekeeper, which means you don't have to get in with the editor. You don't have to get their name and get them to, take the time to read your thing that might be just as good as the other guy getting published, but yet they don't know who you are. So social media, you can just put your stuff out. The trade-off is, yeah, there's this huge audience and it's free, but is it really free? And I don't know the answers to this. This is way more of a throwing out kind of like my thoughts, because there's a huge amount of time that's invested, your own time usually, unless you're at that level where you can hire that out, which I'm not. I would love to. So, I've seen the situation now where sometimes brands, commercial clients, publishers will choose someone else's photos that might not be as good to be used for something because they have a big social media following. So it's like they're scratching each other's back kind of thing. And that's tough because I haven't been real great at the social media thing. I have an Instagram, all that, but I need to be better at it for sure. But it is the question. I personally don't think it really is free, because there is an opportunity cost of, the amount of time you're investing, obviously. I talk to people who have these big followings and they spend hours a day on there, which is tough for me as someone who pretty much wants to be outside all the time, as do I really want to be tied to my phone all the time? So I've personally always had this kind of push-pull thing with it. So, and then the question is it true audience? Okay, you got 100,000 followers or 500,000 or 5 million, whatever the number is. Are those all real actual people that interact with you, and are interested in what you're doing and so on and so forth? In my case, I teach a lot of photo workshops now. I've been moving to some extent away from some of the publishing just because the markets have gotten smaller, and teaching more photo workshops, a few a year now. And, I'm looking at social media as also a way to spread the word about that. So yeah, I think, with regards to publishing, it's a continually changing thing. And I feel like the change has slowed down, but man, in the course of my career, starting shooting black and white, then starting to shoot slide film, switching to digital, stock market's going away, publishing changing, it's been kind of a ride. So, it's not letting me change slides. There we go. So to wrap up, and then I can stick around and do as many questions as you guys can come up with. Try to stump me, I guess. It'll be fun. But to wrap up, I've always liked this picture because I think of, while styles have changed, photography has actually never been any easier. And, writing, I was one of those lucky kids who could not spell worth beans and was really tough at writing. But, by the time 3rd or 4th grade came along, the word processor came into the classroom. So just like photography has never been easier, writing has never been easier. You could take your laptop, you could write on the top of a mountain if you wanted, and the beauty is now it underlines all my misspelled words in red, so I can fix them so I don't look like an idiot. But I've always enjoyed this picture of Ed Cooper. I emailed him several years ago when I saw this photo, and I was like, Ed, can I use this? He doesn't know me, but I've always looked up to him. He was a photographer, a climber like myself, and then was a landscape photographer. He's still alive, back when these clothes were normal. And he was like, yeah, sure, you could totally use it. And I said, thanks. But when you look at this, you think about like, how much work is it to set this camera up to be able to take, what is that? An 8x10 camera, I think, to take a single frame or maybe two that cost how much versus, you could do the same thing handheld with maybe better than your phone, but you wouldn't need much. So photography has never been easier. Writing has never been easier. The converse side of that is there's never been more photographers than ever before. So that does mean that the market is harder, it's more saturated, I would say. But I think the big thing is figuring out what you want to photograph, what you want to write about, and then finding that audience that you can connect with. And then, if you're passionate about it, you'll be the best that you can be of that. And then hopefully that will open those doors. Listen to those critiques. Don't give up. It's been a very slow process. It's not like one day outdoor photographer called me and said, hey, we'd love you to come and, write for us or whatever. It doesn't work like that. I wish it did, but I'm still waiting. I mean, I've done some work for National Geographic, but I've always been like, oh, I'd love to do an assignment for them. But the reality of it is, you don't call them, they call you. So anyways, if you want to find out more about photography, shooting, writing, any of those things, I'll stick around and do questions. You could always email me. I've got my Instafacegram on there. I teach a few workshops a year, small groups of no more than 6, try to keep it super small so you actually get personal attention as opposed to the big 15 people type things. I do a bear trip in Alaska, an eagle trip in Alaska, Yosemite, Costa Rica, and then Tahoe, which is local for me. So I just do like day trips in Tahoe. So that's my show. I will totally stick around. I'm sure I left things out, but please, ask questions and let's chat.
One thing I'll tell you for sure is that especially during the sump pump picture, I laugh. So I'm sure a lot of
them good.
Laugh. And I do want to mention to people that is actually the first NiSi filter holder that you're looking at there in front of that 8x10 camera. That's I recognize it. I think that's the V1.
Are you?
No, I'm joking.
I was trying to tell. Wait, are you serious?
No. That's a great photograph. We should have a large copy of that in our office. Well, you are. Oh, by the way, you know what? Jean is asking a question that I'm sure. I'm just going to ask it, and I understand if you don't really want to answer it. Her question is, what is a reasonable payment for an article and photos? And I'm going to give you an out on that if you don't really want to answer it. Is in the old days, there used to be the ASMP guide to pricing your work. Is there anything like that today?
So I think it's a really good question that unfortunately doesn't have as good of an answer as one would like, in that I think it's very dependent on the publisher. I probably shouldn't name names and prices because I think that probably wouldn't be appropriate. But at the same time, I think that, I think there's still that program too, like the photo price guide, something program that was out. And yes, there used to be like a book you could buy. And I feel like those things are totally invalid. Like for the most part, I feel like I'm mostly in the situations that I deal with, I'm mostly at the mercy of the publisher because they're like, this is our rate, take it or leave it. Once in a while, I have been able to, usually not the first time I've worked with them, but once I've established a relationship, been able to say, that's kind of low for, X, Y, and Z. And, sometimes the best example I had was, probably one of the biggest names in the photography world wanting to use a photo of mine, and they wanted to use it for free. And, I was like, I really want to be published by them, but do I, say no? And finally, I can't, and I kind of sort of hinted at this story before. I came back to him and said, well, I really would like to help you guys out, but I know that you guys have an actual photo budget. So it went from 0 to the amount for myself to buy. The only time I've ever actually spent my money on something for myself, like sort of frivolously maybe, and I went and bought myself a Martin guitar, which I'd always, dreamed of having, like a nice Martin guitar. So, and that was basically the difference of, I don't remember if it was on the phone or via email, trying to, nicely steer it to like, come on, can't you help me out a little bit? But when you're first starting, I think you're kind of at the mercy of, and they know that. That's, I think, really unfortunate. You're kind of at the mercy of whatever they say their rate is. The best thing, one thing I would say is you could always ask them, hey, do you have a rate sheet, or, do your submission guidelines have, what your typical pay rates are? Because at least at that point, maybe they actually have one, which would be good. If they don't, then you already know something's, it may be a little low, but at that point, they may take you a little more seriously too. So I have led with that a few times when people have wanted to use stuff. I said, well, what's your typical rate for that? And then, try to, there is some bargaining, I think, that goes on, but in the beginning, you don't have a lot of leverage, and there's a million other good photos out there. So it's tough. It's not an easy thing. So
Yeah. A lot
it
of
could be anything from, to throw a couple numbers, I know of friends that, and I still sell some stuff through calendars. I know some people, some companies are paying like $25 for a calendar image, and others are paying 500. So there's a big range, and they probably have similar size of actual numbers of calendars produced. So there's a big range in that.
Josh, thank you very, very much. I don't want you to go anywhere quite yet, but I would like Andrew to put up our board.
I can stop sharing the screen here.
I think just if you can do stop sharing, and you have questions. But what I really want to do is, before I start losing people, is please remember that there's a 15% off coupon code for everything NiSi except the lens. I have to keep saying that. And we also have our Explorer line. So please check out explorerphotovideo.com and check out the new Explorer. We've got a little tripod that people would absolutely love to use. It's a little carbon fiber tripod, low angle. It's dynamite. And I can't thank you enough. I knew this would be a great conversation, and I knew it would be a great subject to cover that people would like. And I really want to say thank you very much, Josh, for it. And, we usually hang up, we usually end these things. And I just want you to know, everybody, don't listen, I'll talk to you tomorrow and we'll do a kind of a wrap up on it. But I'm super, super pleased with this. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, if anybody has questions, I'll stick around. You could always email me. I have my email in there. You can find me on the interweb or Instafacegram or any of that stuff if you're interested in, workshops or just have questions and things like that. That's like why I do this. So
fantastic. Well, I'll be in touch with you soon, guys. This is your last shot. Any questions? And if not, I'm going to say goodbye. We do not have anything in the pipeline right now for webinars, but do follow us at NiSi Optics USA on Instagram and on Facebook and anywhere you want to go. And we'll have something really good for you soon, okay? Josh, bravo. Thank you so much.
Yes. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.
Jim, do you just want to touch base tomorrow, or do you want to chat right now?
No, well, no. Well, I'm off camera, so you can't see my gestures. No, hi, everyone, if anyone's there. No, we'll talk tomorrow. We'll chat tomorrow.
All right. Well, I'm going to sign.
Fantastic. Bye-bye.